Welcome back to another episode of the What We're Watching podcast. I'm Megan.
And I'm Jenny.
And I'm Brian.
And today we're talking about Hamilton.
And we have a very special guest. My husband, Brian, is here to talk about Hamilton with us. Hi, Brian.
Hello, ladies. I'm very excited to be here for my favorite musical.
Probably one of the only ones you like, and probably the musical that got you into musicals, right?
Absolutely. On all counts.
Okay, I want to dive into all of that, but Brian, I actually just want to ask, when you heard that we were doing Hamilton on the podcast, were you like, I gotta be on, or was Megan like, you gotta be on? How did this happen?
I think it was both. I've wanted to be.
She's shaking her head no.
I mean, I've wanted to be on the show with you guys for a while, and then Megan had me guess what you guys were doing for your July 4th episode, and so I made a bunch of guesses, some funny, some real guesses. I was not getting any of them, and then she told me you guys were doing Hamilton, and I was like, oh, that's so fun, and then I asked to be on, I'm pretty sure.
Well, I'm so glad that you're here, because when Megan suggested it to me, I was like, yes, we need to have Brian on the podcast. And I'm sorry that Robert is not here, but there was no way I was editing 4 voices. It just wasn't going to happen.
That's fair. We'll hang with Robert another time.
Yeah, one day we'll get all 4 of us on.
Maybe we'll do an unhinged bonus video episode or something that we don't need to edit, and we'll have Robert on for that.
That would be amazing.
Robert with the hot takes.
Yes, he's full of them. Full of them.
In this episode, we're talking about the creative team behind Hamilton, because it wasn't just Lin-Manuel Miranda. We're also talking about the fact that Hamilton was never intended to even be a musical, even after the songs were written. The cast members' romantic relationships, because there were more than one in the cast. The catapult to stardom that many of the cast experienced after Hamilton, and the many behind-the-scenes facts that I've learned over years of researching this production.
Over years, my goodness.
Years, I know. We went through a phase in 2020 when Hamilton came out on Disney Plus, where both of us were just deep into the Hamilton fandom, I guess. And I fell into a podcast called the Hamilcast. You guys will hear me reference it probably a lot throughout this episode. And the host of that podcast has had on Lin-Manuel Miranda, a lot of the creatives behind the show, a lot of the cast members, and I hyperfixated on it for probably a year. So I've like picked up a lot of fun things. It was really fun to like deep dive it for so long.
So was 2020 when you got into it?
Yes, I was not early in the Hamilton trend. I feel like a lot of people got into it when it actually went on Broadway in 2015, and we'll talk about that. But for me, it wasn't until I could see it on Disney Plus. This was your first time watching it, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had never seen it before.
Wow.
Wait, so Brian, were you a fan too? Or did Megan get you into it?
I became more of a fan when in probably the same time period as Megan, but I had heard the music a lot before. I had a roommate in college who was super into it, and so he would play it sometimes. And I was like, nowadays, I will watch musicals, and some I like and some I don't like. Then I would say at that point in time, I was probably an anti-musical in general kind of person as a 20-year-old. But I listened to that music, and I liked the music he would play it. I thought it was fun and interesting, but I never listened to it in order, right? And like, if you don't listen to a musical in order, you hear the songs, but you don't get it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until it came out on like the Disney recording that everyone could watch it live where I like really understood, okay, this is like how it flows. And then I loved it after that. So.
Yay. I like that you two can bond over it. At Megan's bachelorette party, all the girls were singing Hamilton songs, and I had never heard any of the songs before.
Oh.
I knew what Hamilton was, but I didn't know the songs, and I was so confused.
Before we get too deep into it, this musical is about the real life of one of America's foremost founding fathers and first Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. And we're going to be talking about the recording that was captured live on Broadway from the Richard Rodgers Theater with the original Broadway cast, and it is the same one that you can see now on Disney Plus.
It's really nice that they made it accessible for people like us to watch it.
Definitely. Agreed. I feel like you really need somebody to like hold your hand and teach you about Hamilton. I don't know how you fared. I'm curious to hear what you thought of it. But I know at least for me and also for Brian, we had somebody in our lives that was really interested in Hamilton and history. And like I had my sister Hannah tell me about a lot of the songs and talk me through the story before I ever watched it. So I was familiar with the music and, the general basis of the story. So I wasn't trying to follow the story and listen to the lyrics and take in the show all at the same time. What did you think watching it the first time? Did you like it or did you hate it?
I wish I had a Hannah to hold my hand through it. What do I think about Hamilton? I don't think I felt like the target audience here.
Yeah.
I don't think that sitting home and watching it on my TV, I really felt anything about it. I had a lot of mixed opinions about how they went about things too, but I could see how it was really smart how they did things, and I could see how if I saw this on Broadway, I would be super invested and interested in what was happening. I think it's just the environment of watching it at home. And I went into it knowing nothing really, except that it was about Alexander Hamilton. And so I was doing what you were talking about, where I was like, all right, this song is happening and this is that character and they're talking about this in the song. And I don't know what it is about me, but during songs I black out.
And
the
this
whole
musical
damn musical
yeah.
is a song.
There's no
break.
I noticed when I was outlining it, there is no dialogue between songs. It is purely song to song to song, which is not always the case. It is for this one, yeah.
I think that's what makes it so special probably, is because they just do rap instead of dialogue. But for me, after the first song, which went 13 minutes long, I was like, oh, I can't wait for them to get to some dialogue because I need a break from the song so that I can figure out what's happening.
You need context.
Yeah, and it just didn't happen for me.
Well, it's okay. We're going to do it today. Allow me to be your hand holder. And then for the audience, you guys can all go back and watch it again afterwards if you want.
I think it will give me a new respect to hear you both talk about how much you like it too. So I'm ready.
Before we get even deeper into the episode, quick disclaimer that Brian and I are recording in a different room of our house than I normally do. So if you hear squeaks or our dog running around, that's why.
Little Stevie.
I'm not able to take care of her while you do this like I normally do.
That's true, yes.
So
Brian normally
she's on
corrals
her own.
our puppy. So she's loose now.
She's on the loose. Steve on the run.
That's right.
Okay, should we get into the background of the musical?
Let's do it. First, I wanted to get into the cabinet, which refers to the creative team behind Hamilton. There's 4 of them that put the show together. I'm sure you guys know about Lin-Manuel Miranda. He is the creator, writer, composer, lyricist behind Hamilton. We're going to talk about him more in a little bit. There's also a guy named Thomas Kail. I believe he goes by Tommy, so Tommy Kail. He is the director of the musical. Thomas Kail was also the one to convince Lin to make Hamilton into a musical, like a full show, and not just a mixtape. So it was originally intended to just be a rap mixtape album, which maybe is actually why there isn't a lot of dialogue in the show.
How was that going to be distributed?
On Spotify? Distributed.
That pith.
What a niche thing to do. Make
I
a
know.
mixtape about the founding fathers rapping and not have it be a show?
It is surprising because Lin had already written and created In the Heights, which is another Broadway musical. So you would think that this would have come naturally, but that wasn't his initial concept.
Interesting.
We also have Alex Lacamoire, who arranged the music. He actually played piano for the songs in very early performances of the show and just of the songs before it was going to be a show. So he was involved really early on in the creative process with Lin. And then we also have Andy Blankenbuehler. He is the choreographer of the show. And I will yet again shout out the Hamilcast, especially the episodes from around 2020. That's when I was listening. And also when the host had on all of these cabinet members. I loved the episode specifically with these 4. They each came on separately and really deep dove, what it took to direct, all of the different steps that came with choreographing the show, which numbers were hardest to choreograph, which ones came last. And I am not even a musical nut, but it was fascinating to hear about it. I listened to episodes with the sound designer and the wig designer and the people in charge of costumes and a bunch of the cast members. And it was really cool. So would definitely recommend.
The choreography was so good
Mm-hmm.
in this show. That was one thing, even if I wasn't following the plot totally part of the time or whatever my thoughts were, I was like, wow, look, they just like threw a chair and someone caught it. You know, it was kind of impressive.
Yeah, and it's very intentional. There's a lot of thought behind even just the ensemble's every single movement and having them tell the story just subconsciously. So it was cool. Okay, now let's talk about how Lin conceptualized the show to begin with. So he actually read Ron Chernow's famous biography of Alexander Hamilton, and from that book, he decided he wanted to create, like I said, a rap mixtape with songs telling his story. Wild. Lin felt a personal connection to Alexander Hamilton because Hamilton was an immigrant. I imagine he was just fascinated to learn that one of the founding fathers of America came from another country. Lin's parents are immigrants, so I think he just resonated with the story personally.
Interesting.
He actually began writing Hamilton in 2009, and the off-Broadway debut came in 2015, and it went to Broadway just 6 months later. And it's still on Broadway today at the Richard Rodgers Theater, which is the same theater that it's been at the whole time. Before I knew anything about Broadway or musicals, before I got into this one, I didn't realize that that was a thing, that shows stay at the same theater, obviously, in New York the whole time they're on Broadway.
Does it still sell out daily like it did at the beginning?
I think it does.
That is nuts. But I kind of believe it because I think people are just crazy about Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, okay, so Brian, you said that you weren't into musicals, and then Hamilton was kind of like your gateway to musicals.
Yeah, and when I guess gateway to musicals, now I will watch them and not. I'll hold my like decision on if I like it or not till the end. So like for example, the one that I also really like that came out recently as a movie is Tick Tick Boom, which I have recently learned was also a Lin-Manuel Miranda directed movie. Is it his first one, Megan?
Huh.
think
I
you
didn't know
told me
that.
And that stars Andrew Garfield. That is on Netflix, and it's really, really good. I love that musical. It's about the creator of Rent, which is also a famous musical on Broadway, but it's about that guy. He also wrote this as another musical, but Rent is his famous one. Anyway, so I love that one, but also I don't love all musicals still, or like all the famous ones, because like we went and saw like Wicked at the theaters when that came out recently, and I like fell asleep during Wicked. I didn't like it.
No.
It did not
plug your
resonate
ears, girls.
It did not resonate with me. I didn't love it. I did like the last musical number that like before the end of this first movie for Wicked was really great, but overall the story didn't resonate with me as much. So I wouldn't say I'm like a fan of all musicals now. Or like the new Mean Girls musical movie, I also didn't love that one either. I thought it was okay, but it wasn't like my favorite.
But you wouldn't be like Robert in the theater with me when he found out it was a musical and looked at me like
Which
I
one
had
was
betrayed
this?
him.
Was this Mean
Girls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I think in the past I would have not even like I wouldn't even turn a musical on to give it a watch, but now I'll give them all a shake. Like In the Heights, I haven't seen the musical version, but the movie version that came out, I actually really liked that one too. It wasn't my favorite, but I liked that one. So I think it just depends.
I'll have to try those. I think a lot of people feel the way that you do. Actually, a lot of people in my family feel the way that you do about musicals, or the way that you did about musicals. So maybe Hamilton would be their way in also. I don't know.
I think with Hamilton as well, I did like AP US history back in high school, and my teacher was obsessed with Alexander Hamilton. And so like at the beginning of the class, when like whatever the first thing Hamilton does in US history class, he was like, remember this guy's name because he's going to keep coming up and coming up and coming up. He essentially said, when during the tests and during the things that we do, the best first guess of like who did this thing is probably Alexander Hamilton. Or if it wasn't him, he probably had a hand in it because he was just somebody who was very involved, even though he was never president and all of this, right? But he was very involved with a lot of important things.
I kind of wish I took A Push now because I'm like, wow, that would have been really good context to have coming into watching this. Because I had
Yeah,
none.
I feel like you had a lot of the context. I also did not take A Push.
I heard it was hard, so I said, okay, never mind.
Agree. I did the same thing. I took AP World and was like, this is not for me. I will take on-level history moving forward. Thank you.
I took AP Psych instead.
I also took AP Psych.
Twinsies.
Like, this feels more my speed. Yes.
Brian was like, I was in AP Physics. All the hard ones. Calculus.
The last thing I'll say before we move on to the cast is the first song that Lin wrote for the musical is the song Alexander Hamilton, which is the first song in the musical, and it took him a year to write. And so did the second song, My Shot. Also the second song, I believe, in the musical, also took another year to write.
I'm just imagining him writing for this mixtape idea that he has, and I can't take it seriously for some reason. Because I'm just like, what was your plan with that, sir?
You mean like financially? Like how was he gonna commercialize it?
Well, no, you don't have to commercialize art, but like how was he gonna share it? Like, was he going to hand out mixtapes to people on the streets of New York? I don't know.
I don't know. My assumption is he was gonna release it as an actual album, almost like a soundtrack, like you would have a soundtrack to a musical, and just market it as an album, but maybe call it the Hamilton mixtape or something. Because I think it's probably supposed to be modeled after like early 2000s rap mixtapes, but I don't think it was going to be a physical tape.
That would be cute if it was, though.
It would.
Imagining a datpiff.com release.
What is that?
That was like a big thing when you were talking about like 2000s mixtapes being released on the internet. That was where a lot of them, like 2000 and 2010s, where they were released. You all fans of the show can go Google this website if it even exists anymore. I don't even know if it does.
How do you spell it?
I think it's DATPFFF. I think it's 3 Fs.
Datpiff.
Something like that. Yeah, it was a website where like I'm pretty sure Chance the Rapper, his big album that like put him on the scene, I'm pretty sure he released it as a mixtape. The one that blew up was one called Acid Rap that he put, I think, on Datpiff. So it's like a place where a lot of, almost like a SoundCloud, right? You like anyone can go post stuff, but it was like specifically aimed at rap music versus SoundCloud is a lot of electronic things like that. Anyways,
I miss the SoundCloud days. Good throwback. Okay, let's talk about Lin-Manuel Miranda, who plays Alexander Hamilton.
So Lin is not only responsible for creating Hamilton and the musical In the Heights, but he also wrote the music for Moana. He was on the songwriting team for Bring It On the musical. He wrote songs for the live-action Little Mermaid. He starred in Mary Poppins Returns. He is part of Freestyle Love Supreme, which is an improv rap group that Chris Jackson, who plays George Washington, is also part of. That group was on Broadway for a while. He also directed Tick Tick Boom on Netflix, starring Andrew Garfield. He wrote the music for Encanto and many, many more things. So his career has really exploded since Hamilton in like a million directions. He is acting, he's directing, he is writing more music.
He's done a lot of stuff.
Does not have an EGOT yet, but he's close.
He's very close, yes. He, I believe, has everything but the Oscar and has been Oscar nominated.
What was he Oscar nominated for?
I think Encanto.
Okay.
I'm not positive, but I think it was Encanto.
I think Moana as well, right? Didn't he have 2?
Oh, maybe it was
I think
Moana.
he had 2 nominations, but I don't think he's won.
That
It's
makes
coming,
sense.
though.
It's coming.
He actually wrote the musical In the Heights in college, and that, like Brian mentioned earlier, is actually now a movie starring Anthony Ramos. Anthony Ramos is the actor who originated the roles of John Lawrence and Philip Hamilton in this show, so we'll talk about him in a minute. And I also read that Lin was a substitute middle school teacher after he graduated college, and before In the Heights went off Broadway in 2007, that was his job.
Cute.
And then in 2008, In the Heights had its Broadway debut, and it won 4 Tony Awards. So he started writing Hamilton the next year, coming off of that success. So I imagine maybe he even just thought of the Hamilton mixtape as like a fun project, because this was probably what he thought was like a peak or like the start of he could do whatever projects he wanted, because he, had just written this very successful musical that actually went to Broadway, that actually then won 4 Tony Awards.
Around this time as well, and you'd have to fact check me on when it happened, but I'm pretty sure he performed a version of Alexander Hamilton, that intro song, at the White House for Barack Obama for some function that I cannot remember the name of. I don't know if that is what inspired him to turn it into more of a show versus a mixtape, because I'm pretty sure it was received very well. I think it was, let me say this, I think it was received with mixed reactions, because there's lots of stodgy old people in the White House and the surrounding place. And so I think some people thought it was interesting, some people thought it was odd, and some people really liked it. But I think the reaction that it got from doing it in that public setting was this could be interesting to do it bigger than I think he was probably thinking at the time.
Interesting.
That's a fun performance to watch. If you guys ever want to deep dive on Hamilton, look up the video of that performance because you can tell everybody in the room is kind of like, what's going on now? Because the show is like, or that song, Alexander Hamilton, it's the opening number, is like very abrasive. Like it's very loud and in your face and it's interesting.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of funny. And so there are a lot of funny reactions in the room. It's a good
Okay,
video.
I'm going to look it up after this. That sounds fun.
But you're right, Brian. Actually, when he was at the White House and did that performance is actually when he announced the mixtape project. So that's when he kind of publicly let everybody know that he was working on it. And then the show didn't go to off-Broadway and then Broadway until 2015. And it ultimately won 11 Tonys.
Wow. Impressive. Now we have Leslie Odom Jr., who plays Aaron Burr.
Leslie Odom Jr. won a Tony and a Grammy for his performance as Burr. And he has actually since won an Emmy and been nominated for an Oscar. So he has the same EGOT standing as Lin right now. I would not be surprised if he also goes on to become an EGOT in our lifetime. And you guys have actually probably seen him in movies or TV shows after his run in Hamilton. He is one of the stars of the musical that has taken off and kind of more so in the Hollywood circle. There obviously are several cast members that have gone on to do a lot of other musicals and plays. And then there are a handful that have really become TV and movie stars. He is one of them. He was in Murder on the Orient Express, Harriet, and Glass Onion, which is the sequel to Knives Out.
Oh, that's how I know him, I think.
So the next lead character is George Washington, played by Chris Jackson in both Act 1 and Act 2. He's also an original ensemble member for Lion King on Broadway. He also played Simba in that musical. And he also originated the role of Benny in the Heights. So he had worked with Lin in his previous famous musical.
Cool.
He also plays the chief in Moana, so that's Moana's dad.
Oh, this makes sense. Yep.
He has the same like endearing, lovable dad energy, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Lin has carried him through several different pieces of work. He's won an Emmy as well for his original song, What I Am, that he did for Sesame Street. And he's even starred in the CBS TV show Bull. He is also the dad of an autistic son, so he and his wife are big advocates for children with autism. He's very open about it, and they support the organization Culture City, which is a nonprofit promoting acceptance and inclusion of all individuals, regardless of their abilities.
I've listened to a couple of interviews with him, and he is very down-to-earth sounding and just like very kind and like feels like he could be your friend's dad, you know, like that type of vibe. So big fan of him.
So the next character is played by David Diggs, who plays Marquis de Lafayette in Act 1 and Thomas Jefferson in Act 2. Both of our resident French-related personas.
Correct.
I loved him in this. If he wasn't in this, I would have hated this show.
He is many people's favorite. He is one of the biggest breakout stars of Hamilton. He has become, I wouldn't say a household name, but a lot of people know him. He's become quite a persona. You guys might know him from Blackish, Central Park, DC League of Super Pets. He was Sebastian in the live-action Little Mermaid, so he starred alongside Awkwafina. He was in Trolls Band Together, Star Wars, Prodigy, the TV show, Snowpiercer, and so many more things. So his career really has just exploded. He is also the first of several actors in the cast that we're going to talk about that play double roles. So a big part of Hamilton originally, and I believe a lot of this was partially creative choice, partially budget related. They had a lot of actors play two roles, and every time someone plays two roles, it's very intentional, the tie between those two characters. So like Brian said, Marquis de Lafayette is French, and Thomas Jefferson is a famous Francophile, so it makes sense that he played both of them. Emmy Raver Lampman is David's partner. She's the coolest. Like, her energy is very similar to his energy. They both just give off like the most relaxed, cool people ever. She was actually an original ensemble member of Hamilton, and she was the understudy of all three of the Schuyler sisters. That is how they met. And she ultimately toured with Hamilton as Angelica and was Angelica in the San Francisco installment of Hamilton. You guys might know her as Allison from the Umbrella Academy. She's the one with like the mind power.
Oh, okay. Yep.
With the curly hair. She has also been in Central Park, the show, and the movie Dog. And they have been together since 2015, so since the beginning of Hamilton, and they now have a baby.
Cute.
So the last cast member we're going to touch on of this sort of founding fathers group of characters is Okidate Onaudewan, and he goes by Oak. Of all of the cast members, you guys are probably least likely to know him, although I might eat my words if you guys are Station 19 fans. He is a star of the show Station 19, and he was also in Grey's Anatomy. So those are kind of the main things that he's gone on to do after Hamilton. He plays Hercules Mulligan and James Madison, so another dual role.
Very cool. Next, we have the Schuyler sisters, starting with Philippa Sue, who plays Eliza Schuyler Hamilton.
Philippa is from Dr. Odyssey, Shining Girls, Dope Sick, and more. She also played the title role of Amelie on Broadway and Cinderella in Into the Woods, among many other Broadway performances. I would say she has been largely a Broadway performer, although now with Dr. Odyssey, which I believe is a network show, I've been seeing a lot more advertisements for that show, so I think it's kind of taking off. Philippa went to Juilliard, which I thought was very cool. And she is married to the actor Stephen Pascal, who she met through Jonathan Groff, who's the actor that plays King George in Hamilton.
My other favorite character.
Yes, for sure.
Next, we have Renee Elise Goldsberry, who plays Angelica Schuyler.
Renee has done a lot of TV since Hamilton. You guys may have seen her in Girls 5 Eva, Eureka, She-Hulk Attorney at Law, Fast and Furious Spy Racers, Altered Carbon, and The Good Wife. And she also releases her own music, including her album Who I Really Am, that came out this year.
Nice. And last of the Schuyler sisters, we have Jasmine Cephas Jones, who plays Peggy Schuyler, and Mariah Reynolds.
Her dad was Ron Cephas Jones, who passed away in 2023, and he is probably best known for playing William Hill in This Is Us.
If you guys watched any of This Is Us, you know who that is. So just to draw the connection that's her dad.
So she went to the Berklee College of Music. She has been in Blind Spotting, #Free Ray Sean, The Photograph, Origin, and a few other productions. And she was dating and engaged to Anthony Ramos, who is Lawrence and Philip, and they were together for 6 years.
Oh, wow. Another Hamilton relationship.
That's right.
But dating and engaged, no, broke off after 6.
Thank you for asking. We're about to talk about that.
Oh, great. Perfect.
He's like, this sounds like tea. You gonna throw it in the harbor?
Speaking of, let's get into Anthony Ramos, who plays John Lawrence and Philip Hamilton. He is another one of the big breakout stars from Hamilton, at least when it comes to movies. He's been in A Star is Born, Trolls World Tour, In the Heights, the movie, Transformers Rise of the Beasts, Twisters, and he is also the upcoming Bob the Builder. Bob of Bob the Builder. That's right. So like Brian said, Anthony was dating and engaged to Jasmine Cephas Jones. So they were together for a long time. They actually have a lot of really sweet photos and videos together on social media because they both sort of came up at the same time. Neither of them were famous at all before Hamilton. They met on the show. They dated the entire time they were both on the show. It is rumored that he cheated on her and that's why they broke up. But he also has a pretty successful music career and his lyrics don't make it sound like that's what happened. And he doesn't even like directly deny it. He just sort of like makes it sound like it was something else. They're pretty private about their breakup. It doesn't seem like they have bad blood, but they don't talk about it publicly either, which is interesting. But yeah, it's a bummer because I remember watching when I got into Hamilton, they were still together, and I remember watching like their engagement video like that her mom took. And so it's like it was very wholesome. So it's a bummer.
That is sad.
My hunch is that he just got shot into huge stardom. Like he's a star of Transformers now, you know what I mean? And I just feel like when we see celebrity relationships where one person's career takes off a lot faster than the other person, it's rare that they stay together.
Oh, so like John Mulaney.
Yeah.
Barry
yes.
Keoghan. Who's the other guy? Jeremy Allen White.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about my friend Jonathan Groff, who plays King George.
The highlight of the whole show, I think.
Him and David Diggs, I was like, honestly, I just want a show with just them two singing the entire time, and I would be on the edge of my seat, really.
The comedic relief, they both really leaned into it. And especially David Diggs making his characters funny when, like, it's not in the script that they're funny, really, is amazing. So you guys know Jonathan Groff as Kristoff in Frozen. He was also in Mindhunter, Knock at the Cabin, Glee. He is Jesse St. James in Glee. And a lot of other things. You guys probably know that he's besties with Lea Michele.
Wait, can I tell you that when I was watching it, I did not recognize him from Glee at all. But I was like, who is this guy? And so I'm looking at his IMDb, and then I see Glee, and I was like, who is he in Glee? And then I found out he was Jesse St. James, and I'm like telling Robert, that's Jesse St. James. And he's like, who?
Jonathan has actually been on Broadway since 2005, so for a long time he was definitely one of the more tenured performers when Hamilton came about. He has been in Spring Awakening, Merrily We Roll Along, Little Shop of Horrors, and many other productions. Jonathan is also gay and out and has always been really open about his sexuality and his struggles with it, and is a big advocate of LGBTQ plus rights, which is very cool.
One thing it's probably worth calling out at this point, since we're talking about Jonathan Groff, is out of all these major characters, because we'll only talk about one other kind of more major name through this play, is he is the only white character in the whole show, right? And it's a show that is talking about the founding fathers of America, who we all know from all of our history textbooks. Even if you were not in AP US history, they were all white. And so it's very intentional the way that this show is cast to be people of color in all of the major roles. But the king, and then you'll notice throughout the show, all of the soldiers that are acting for the British side are all white. So they kept all the people who are white in the show are essentially the British.
The oppressors.
The oppressors, exactly. Mm-hmm.
I think that's such an interesting choice. And I think that's also another reason why Hamilton just took off the way that it did. Because, I mean, it's rap music on Broadway. The whole thing is a freaking song. And then you've also got, like, this really diverse cast talking about the history that's not really diverse. Although I will say I've seen a lot of discourse online about this choice, because some people think that the way that this musical handles slavery is kind of maybe like dismissive. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's the word that's coming to mind. And then it turned all of the founding fathers into people of color, but didn't actually highlight any people of color from the time who were forced to fight and who were slaves and in other situations. And so I think that's kind of some interesting discourse about the musical. And I guess technically, like, Alexander Hamilton didn't have slaves, but he rented slaves.
Yeah, if we step back in our time machine, time shoes, like, all of the people in this time, these founding fathers, were all wealthy. Even Hamilton, who was poor in the grand scheme of things, was not nearly as poor as, a large percentage of the population that was enslaved. So I think, I do think that is something that is glossed over a little bit in terms of carrying the show, but that is what the history was, so.
I actually didn't even realize that discourse was happening, but I think that's a really good point.
It made me feel really uncomfy during it, and I think that's because I'm looking at it through like a 2025 lens, and I didn't see it on Broadway, and I didn't have any of the context of the show before I like got into it, so I was just like, oh.
Yeah, that's interesting. I really appreciate the notion that the show is trying to put forth of America being, sort of using this show as a metaphor to say America is this melting pot of immigrants and a lot of people of color, and it is important to continue to fight for our democracy against an oppressive leadership and class. That, I think, is a really strong takeaway. I do also totally see that it's weird to frame this history through the lens of these actors that are all people of color, while not speaking directly about the names of the people of color that were actually influential at the time. So,
and one other just random piece of history of this came out in 2015, right? Is when it launched. That was the end of Barack Obama's second term. And so I think it's still the most is it this or Wicked has made the most money on Broadway? It's one of these two, right?
Definitely one of those two.
It's one of these two. And if it's Hamilton, you've got essentially what is the most successful Broadway performance that stars nearly all people of color. Also was released during like the end of Barack Obama's second term. It just timed with like a lot of like strides that were taken during his presidency, and it's almost like it culminated in this like Hamilton musical that then took off right at the end.
Do you guys know if it's opened the door for more diverse casting on Broadway in general? Because I feel like this was pretty revolutionary, no pun intended, at the time.
I don't know, actually. I mean, just anecdotally, I feel like it has, but I don't know how much. I don't know.
All right, theater kids, let us know. You know better than we do.
One more note on that. Speaking to Brian's point of it being around the end of Barack Obama's term, you hear a lot of comedians and writers talk about how around the time of Obama's presidency, there was a lot of jokes about slavery, about racism, with the attitude of almost just like, we have a black president, so like that's not a problem anymore. So we can poke at it. Almost like we're so progressive type of jokes. Like that was sort of a flavor of humor that was really popular at that time. You see it a lot in a lot of the movies that came out around then. And then we have since sort of corrected for that in a lot of ways. So I think that might also be a piece of what you're feeling and what people are seeing, definitely.
Interesting.
Just sort of like a lack of seriousness to that.
Yeah.
Okay. The last person that's very important that we talk about is Ariana DeBose, who is an ensemble member in Hamilton, and she plays sort of the ensemble member that represents the bullet, which we'll reference as we go through the recap. She might actually be the biggest star to come out of Hamilton, which is wild that she was just an ensemble member. You guys have seen her in West Side Story, Disney's movie Wish, Love Hurts, The Prom, and Argylle. In 2022, Time actually named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world, and she is an Academy Award winner. I think maybe the only Oscar winner of this group.
Wow.
If you guys don't necessarily know her by name, Google her. You guys will know her face for sure.
She did definitely stand out to me in the ensemble. Like, I couldn't tell you any other face that I saw except for hers. I always noticed her.
Totally. And she has like incredible hair that is like very distinct, I think. She also expressed in her Oscar acceptance speech how proud she is to be an openly queer woman of color. She is also a co-founder of the Unruly Hearts Initiative, which helps connect LGBTQ+ youth with resources like mental health access, education opportunities, shelter, food, crisis care, important resources like that, which I think is very cool.
That's important work.
We love Ariana.
Well, after we've talked about that fantastic cast, should we get into the musical?
Let's do it. So like Jeni mentioned earlier, the entire musical is made up of songs. That might sound obvious, but there's actually no dialogue between any of the songs.
Sadly.
I think there's one piece of dialogue near the end. Otherwise, it's all songs. So we're going to say the name of the song. We might mention a notable lyric to kind of help jog your memory of what the song is, and then we'll kind of cover what happens in that section. So the musical opens with the song Alexander Hamilton. A notable lyric from the song is, "And the world's gonna know your name. What's your name, man? My name is Alexander Hamilton. There's a million things I haven't done, but just you wait. Just you wait." And the musical opens with Aaron Burr introducing Alexander Hamilton, recounting his tragic and turbulent childhood in the Caribbean through this song. In the lyrics, we learn that Hamilton was born out of wedlock, he was orphaned as a child, and he witnessed his mother's death. And despite these circumstances, he used his intelligence and his writing skills to rise out of poverty. And this song essentially functions as a prologue with the entire cast, including Washington, Eliza, Angelica, and others, foreshadowing their future relationships with Hamilton. There is a really cool part of the song where all of the cast members state their relationship to Hamilton. And so you see John Lawrence, Anthony Ramos, say, "And me, I died for him." And he plays John Lawrence, who passes away, and also Philip Hamilton. And we'll talk about him later. And then we see all of the Schuyler sisters say, "And me, I loved him." And we see more outwardly Angelica have a relationship with Hamilton, Eliza have a relationship with Hamilton, and Peggy doesn't, but the actress that plays Peggy also plays Mariah Reynolds, who does. So this is sort of like a foreshadowing of the entire show.
Love that.
Yeah.
I didn't notice it. Well, I did notice it, but then I forgot it promptly. So
There's so much happening, it's hard to catch it.
I think the last thing that's notable is that it's something that Megan and I noticed on rewatching it again is Aaron Burr launches the whole thing from the beginning, right? He's narrating his life, and then throughout most of the musical, it is Aaron Burr who does a lot of the narration. So there is no, like you're saying, there is no dialogue in the show, but any of the parts of the songs that have more of a narration to them, it's almost always being done by Aaron Burr, who, as you know, throughout the show is like kind of becomes this like frenemy of his throughout the time. So it's just interesting to see him be the one to narrate it and not one of his more close friends or somebody else.
can I be honest? I kind of felt like they should date.
We could have really gone friends to lovers or enemies to lovers. I mean, yeah.
They just needed to kiss and work it out, you know?
Yes, throw the guns, run to each other.
Oh, beautiful. In a field.
Ending. That's right.
Wait, I actually love that. Is that how history works? No, but
one of our listeners can go and create some AI video with that being the ending instead of what actually happens, and then share it with us.
Wow, a powerful use of AI.
Exactly. It's worth whatever the money costs to create it.
Okay, I'm sure there are ships though, right? Like this is Hamilton.
Surely that must be a fanfic that already exists.
It must be. Okay, so next we have the song Aaron Burr, Sir. Newly arrived in New York in 1776, Hamilton meets Aaron Burr, and Hamilton is like very eager and talkative, and he asks Burr for advice. And Burr tells him to talk less, smile more, don't let them know what you're against or what you're for, which is advice that clashes with Hamilton's opinionated nature. And we'll kind of see Aaron Burr cling to that belief that he has later on, and I think it doesn't do him well. Soon after, Hamilton meets John Lawrence, Marquis de Lafayette, and Hercules Mulligan. The group bonds over drinks and shared excitement for the revolution. Hamilton says to Burr, "If you stand for nothing, Burr, what will you fall for?"
So the next song is My Shot. It leads into with Hamilton having just said a sassy comment at the end of Aaron Burr, Sir, to Aaron Burr. And then it jumps into Hamilton starting to share his revolutionary ideas with all of his new friends. The energy escalates as each man continues to join in, amplifies the rallying cry amongst all of them for change. Burr interrupts during the song and says, "Lower your voices, you want to keep out of trouble, and you double your choices." Again, this is a continued theme with Aaron Burr, who kind of loves to kind of play both sides throughout a lot of the story. He's always on the side of the revolutionaries, but in terms of on the revolutionary side, which types of factions on the revolutionary side he wants to be part of, he kind of jumps from different sides throughout his life. And so he doesn't like to speak out like Hamilton and the rest of his new friends. We also get Hamilton's first reference to death that repeats throughout the musical. He says, "I imagine death so much, it feels just like a memory."
When I was reading about Lin-Manuel Miranda, something that I learned is his best friend, I believe in kindergarten, died. She, I think, drowned in a river maybe or a lake or something behind her house. It was really tragic, and it was
That's
a big
sad.
marker of his childhood. It really affected him, obviously. And he has talked about his sort of like fixation on death since then, since childhood. And I think we sort of see this part of Lin come out in Hamilton when Hamilton repeatedly throughout the musical says, "I imagine death so much it feels just like a memory," over and over.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
He purposely cast himself as Hamilton, right? Like, did he write the role for himself?
I think so.
And is somebody else playing that now, I assume?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I should have said this up front, but all of these original cast members have moved on.
Okay, got it.
I think
Makes
the
sense.
longest one of them lasted was for just a few years, maybe a couple of years.
And I'd be interested to know other people who have watched the show and like the show and have their own perspectives on it. I mean, my perspective on most of the cast is that in terms of actual acting and singing ability in this original cast, Lin is the weakest, which is funny because he is the main lead title character, but he actually is not, I think, he's probably the weakest singer. And especially, I was commenting to Megan when we were on our rewatch that live, compared to if you listen to the songs on like a Spotify or an Apple Music, Lin sounds so much better on the record than he does in the live performance. And that's truly because I think they can remix the audio a bit than they can in the live show. And I think it just speaks to that he's a great performer. I can't do what he does on stage, but compared to the rest of the awesome cast members that he put around him in this show, he is probably the weakest, in my opinion.
I'm so happy that you said that because it was so distracting to me the entire time how different he was, like, from the other actors. And there's like one part at the end where he's crying and there's like no tears falling from his eyes, which is fine. You're acting, I don't care, and you're on stage, so how many people can see your face up that close? So I understand that, like, watching it as a movie, it translates totally differently. But like his wife is sitting there crying and she has a real tear rolling down her face, and then he's got this like really animated, horrible crying face happening, but no tears. And Robert and I were laughing.
I mean, I've seen the show, I think, once or twice live now, and neither was with the original cast because that was too long ago. And I think that if you are someone who's seen the show more recently, whether it's the traveling show or the one with a new Hamilton, you probably are actually getting a better Alexander Hamilton performance, probably from whoever they've cast since Lin. Obviously, it's not Lin as the famous original one, but you're probably actually getting a better acting performance. Probably.
I believe it.
In this way, I put him in the same category as Taylor Swift. Don't come at me, Swifties, here, okay? I'm one of you. But, like, Taylor Swift, creative musical genius, okay? Genius lyricist, creative talent. I don't think anybody would argue that, especially in her earlier albums, her vocal performance is not that strong. At least not compared to many of the other very famous pop stars. Like, I'm not even going to name names. The other famous pop stars, you guys know what I'm saying. And she's obviously worked on that, but I think her creative capacity and like her talent in that arena sort of carries her through the performance arena. I think the same is true for Lin, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the difference is that Taylor has put in so many years and so much effort into being better at singing and performing that it just makes me like respect her so much. But if like she decided to start acting and wrote herself in the middle of, she's like the lead in this musical, I would be kind of side-eyeing her a little bit, because even though her like music is super talented and the like play is great, I don't know if play is the right word, she wouldn't be the right fit. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So I don't know that he was the right fit, but you know what? I kind of like, I give him an A+ for effort, for trying it, making it happen.
He was just able to do it because it was that good. I think that's like your Taylor Swift example. If she did the same thing, for her to do it and it not to feel weird, it would have to, or like at least for it to, it might still feel weird, but for it to work, it would have to be that good. And I think that's what this show was able to accomplish, even with him not being probably the perfect fit for the role. It was just such a good show and was so well received by most people who saw it that people were able to just look past it.
And he does have self-awareness, I've seen.
And you don't see him in much other stuff since. Like, you see him writing lots of songs. We see him directing things. You don't see him acting in a lot of other things, because that's not his passion, I think, and it's not his strength. So
yeah. So the next song is called The Story of Tonight. This is the song where they do the toast. You know, the most notable lyric includes raise a glass to freedom, something they can never take away. They repeat that a few times. We're still with the group of men, so Hamilton, Lafayette, Lawrence, and Mulligan, and they toast to the hope of freedom and the future, and there's this sort of quiet sense of brotherhood and idealism. They're kind of like all in a bar just hanging out together, and they're bonding before we see the war truly start, at least in the musical. This song is reprised multiple times throughout the show to show how the group's relationships and ideals have changed over time.
I did actually really like that, how all of the songs kind of came back at the end and they had a different meaning and they were like, there was different context.
Totally.
Next we have the song The Schuyler Sisters. A notable lyric is look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now. The sisters Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy Schuyler explore the city. Angelica in particular says that she's looking for a mind at work. She critiques the male-dominated revolution and expresses her desire for equality. Eliza is intrigued when she hears Hamilton's name for the first time.
I do think it's interesting that they say, look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now, when you could argue they're like living in this really chaotic wartime. That's probably very scary. But I appreciated the sense of like them feeling like they're fighting for, you know, they're part of the revolution. They're part of like fighting for this democracy that's really important to them. I thought that was cool.
And even though the song is about the Schuyler sisters, it starts off with Aaron Burr interacting with the Schuyler sisters. And Leslie Odom Jr. does a great job throughout the show. He's probably one of the best voices in the show. But specifically his interaction with Angelica at the beginning of all the rich people want to come and hang out with the poor people downtown is like essentially the start of their introduction. And it always makes me laugh because I feel like that's just like gentrification today. And it's like very similar to how people still act.
Mm-hmm.
So then we jump into the next song called Farmer Refuted. This song takes place out in the streets where a British loyalist named Samuel Seabury speaks out against the revolution. We see Hamilton kind of come up right next to him and talk over him to challenge his authority, and Burr just watches over this whole thing warily. And a fun fact about this is that this scene actually reflects a real-life pamphlet war between Hamilton and Samuel Seabury, so sort of one person on each side of the revolution. This was a thing that happened at the time, these pamphlet wars, where people would print their opinions, pass it out, someone would print a response. So this is sort of a recreation of one of those.
That's cool. Then there's a song, You'll Be Back. Oh, this is the da-da-da-da?
Yes.
Okay.
You'll be back.
Which is sung by King George. King George III sarcastically warns the colonies about rebellion, framing his threats like an angry ex. He's like, you'll be back like before. I will fight the fight and win the war. And I will say, Robert started watching this with me and he instantly got kind of bored and he walked away. And then he heard this and he was like cackling in the other room and came back to watch.
It's the funniest part.
It's so great.
He's the best. His interludes, I think he has like 2 or 3 or 4 songs, but they're almost all just him. It's just him speaking to us in the crowd, almost like breaking the fourth wall, essentially, to like speak to us. And it's always funny. There's so many funny things to talk about it.
I think he's the reason, too, why Robert then sat his butt on the couch next to me and watched the whole rest of this thing. He was like doing his own thing, but watching it, you know, when you're like, it's like with the boys in reality TV. Brian, I don't know if you do this, where like you're around it and you're like, oh, I hate that show. But then you're like secretly watching it. And then you're like, wait, who is she dating?
I actually think I
Guilty.
do this more with your shows.
Really?
Yes.
That is true.
I'm constantly like just playing a game, or I'll be like watching Love Island on my phone while Brian's watching some Netflix show, and then I'll be like, oh, well, what just happened there? Fun fact about this performance and the king, Jonathan Groff, who plays King George, was spitting during this performance. You can see it in the Disney Plus version. I don't think he actually knew that he was even doing this until he watched this footage. And you also see him barely move, and it's because the crown is so heavy and it like can't fall off. So he's like very still, which I think also adds to like the regalness of his performance, but it is funny.
There's a lot of funny lines in it, but if I could imagine the line where Robert probably really started laughing was how he will show you his love by killing your friends and family.
That was it.
I mean, it's just such a funny, the whole thing, you're kind of like giggling at the whole thing while you're watching it, and then he delivers that line, and it's impossible not to laugh. I mean, you can hear people laugh. If you listen throughout the show and you listen to the audience laughing at certain points, most of the laughs throughout the show come through Jonathan Groff's delivery.
Oh, yeah.
It's so funny.
For sure.
Also, his spit is like probably the most mentioned thing on the Letterboxd reviews. I'll send you some of them after.
Yeah, I want to see. The king is also one of only 2 characters that speak directly to the audience. So like you said, Brian, they kind of break the fourth wall. I think Lawrence does it once very quickly, but otherwise it's just the king. And this is the song where he says, everybody, And he like gets the audience to sing along. So it was like common that there would be audience participation when the king came on stage. So that's cool.
I like that.
So right after we get the introduction of King George, it's followed by the song Right Hand Man, and we get the introduction of George Washington. So we get the introduction of our most famous founding father. A notable lyric is, we're outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, and outplanned. And I think an even better line throughout it is when Washington is talking to Hamilton, and he says, "Dying is easy, young man. Living is harder."
Poetry
From George Washington. I think throughout the musical, and just it kind of reflects real life. George Washington is very much a mythologized character of all the founding fathers. He's the one that's mythologized the most, and that is no different inside this musical. And so in the song, he's being introduced. It starts off as he's like a wrestler, introduced by Aaron Burr. Also, Aaron Burr was somebody who was well in love with George Washington, even though George Washington did not have the same feelings about him back. And the song talks a lot about how George Washington struggled to lead the disorganized Continental Army. He recruits Hamilton as his right-hand man because he is impressed by his writing and his intellect. Burr is disappointed by not being chosen by Washington to be kind of one of his close confidants. And while Hamilton doesn't initially want the position because he would rather be out in the field fighting the war on the ground, he does end up accepting the position with George Washington because he wants to be influential in how it will all shape up.
Fun fact, Chris Jackson, who plays George Washington, really wanted to rap during the musical at some point. He's in an improv rap group with Lin, but Lin didn't think it would be appropriate for Washington to be one of the characters that rap, so he only got these more like serious ballad type songs. And I also wanted to note, I believe he's the only character that we meet in the entire musical facing upstage, which I think is done intentional. So he's facing away from the audience and then turns around when we meet him, center stage. And I think that's just sort of subliminally adds to like the grandiose nature of Washington being this like tall, quiet figure,
Mm-hmm.
That is also my favorite song in the entire musical. I absolutely love that song.
So when it goes boom, right?
Yeah, so it's like boom, the cannons go like throughout the song. Like I just love the flow of the song, and I mean it's just such a fun song. It ends with him with the sword in the air. It's just a lot of it's a fun
Cannons,
song.
swords,
Boys.
men yelling,
Yes.
war.
I mean, overall, like there's like almost two threads throughout a lot of the musical. There is like the history thread related to the war, and then the founding of like the treasury and all of these things. And then there is the thread that is his personal life with the Schuyler sisters and the things that happen on a personal note with Aaron Burr and his kids and everything else on his personal side. So, I mean, as someone who loves like U.S. history, I love this song because it just shows Alex Hamilton was so close to George Washington, who was the most mythologized character, and they were like best friends.
Next, we have the song Winter's Ball. And this is where we start to see parties and courtships. We see Burr and Hamilton attend a ball where the Schuyler sisters are. And they mention that the Schuyler sisters are rich, and marrying them would mean marrying into a rich family. That's important.
Then we have the song Helpless. This is where Eliza recounts her love story with Hamilton. They meet at the Winter's Ball, fall in love very quickly, and get married.
Then we move into Satisfied. This is probably my favorite song of the musical. The song starts at the wedding reception, and we see Angelica give a toast, and she kind of panics as she's talking, and we as the audience realize that she's also in love with Hamilton, and so she has mixed feelings about this. And we see her rewind the scene all the way back to the Winter's Ball, and we see the entire ball and part of the relationship from Angelica's perspective, just in this one song. And so at the ball, we see Angelica and Hamilton meet and bond over their shared inability to be satisfied with their life. That's Satisfied, that's what the song is about. Angelica also admits that she fell for Hamilton but stepped aside for her sister, putting Eliza's happiness first. She says that she realizes 3 truths. 1, that she's a girl in a world where her only job is to marry rich, and that's because she's the eldest in her family and has no brothers. 2, she knows Hamilton is after her because she's a Schuyler sister, and that would elevate his status and his wealth. 3, she knows that if she told Eliza that she had feelings, Eliza would step aside, and she can't do that to her sister. One of my favorite things that I learned listening to the Hamilcast was actually about this song. This is the last song that Andy Blankenbuehler choreographed. I think he did it like the day before they went off Broadway or something. And they couldn't figure out what to do with it. It was just kind of clunky. And then they realized that they could rewind all of the choreography. And so that's kind of where this concept came from of like, let's just redo the whole story of Hamilton meeting Eliza, but instead show it from Angelica's perspective. I don't think that's innately necessarily in the lyrics. It was all done kind of through choreography, but it makes sense when you watch it. I think it's pretty cool.
Interesting.
So we get another one of these reprisals from earlier in the show with Hamilton and his friends in the story of tonight. He's drunk after his wedding, and he's having toasts with Marquis de Lafayette, Hercules Mulligan, and John Lawrence. And then while they're kind of hanging out and chatting post-wedding, Aaron Burr kind of comes up to them and starts chatting with them. He wasn't at the wedding. And and they also find out that Aaron Burr is secretly been sleeping with a British officer's wife who was away fighting the war in a different part of the country. So this is the last time that we see all of the revolutionaries together, this friend group, before the war kind of takes them to different parts of the world.
And then we have Wait for It, where Burr reflects on his life philosophy, which is waiting until he's ready to make any moves. He envies Hamilton's reckless ambition, but believes in waiting for the right moment. I actually really related to him. I was like, wow. I kind of like him. This number serves to humanize Burr because he is the villain in our story. And it worked on me.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good song. And Leslie Odom Jr. is also like a very likable. And he does a really good job, I think, of making us see his perspective.
He just seems like the first daughter energy. Do you know what I mean? Eldest daughter energy.
That's true.
He's very calculated. He's kind of shy and quiet.
Cautious.
He wants to follow the rules. He's definitely got anxiety.
People pleasing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We relate. The next song is called Stay Alive, and we see the war raging. We see Hamilton and Washington navigating military challenges. They confront General Charles Lee's insubordination. Lee is actually removed from command, and that is going to lead to the duel that actually comes in the next song because he badmouths Washington, and that kind of spurs an argument. We also see Hamilton continue to ask Washington for his own command, but Washington wants him in leadership, not in the battlefield. And this is also the first time where we see the bullet, aka Ariana DeBose. She is an ensemble member that holds an imaginary bullet in this scene, and it barely misses Hamilton at the beginning of the song. And so this represents death, and, you know, it's sort of just missing Hamilton, and we'll see it come back throughout the show.
I like that. That's cool.
From here, following up on the General Charles Lee, we lead into the song 10 Dual Commandments. This whole song is just an outlay of all the different rules that they all followed whenever somebody wanted to duel somebody else. And so duels are like a fascinatingly weird and silly part of just American history. I think it's just also Western European history, where you could essentially challenge somebody to a fight to the death and people would do it. And so
can you imagine? I would just be like, no, dude.
All of the rules are kind of outlined throughout the song, and I think the critical part of the whole piece here is that Washington, as our mythologized, lovely founding father, did not want anybody to kind of fight over Washington's pride. And Hamilton didn't stop his friend John Lawrence from participating in the duel with General Charles Lee anyways. And so Washington, of course, finds out about the duel, and he then has to have a fun conversation with Hamilton.
Also, it's so interesting to me that Washington is like the daddy founding father here. He's like the one. I'm pretty sure he had the most slaves out of anybody. And it's just kind of interesting the path they decided to take with this retelling of history, you know? But I like his character a lot.
Agree.
The next song is Meet Me Inside, and a notable lyric from this is Call Me Son One More Time. Washington is furious about the duel, and he demands an explanation from Hamilton, who defends Lawrence and asks for command of a battalion again. And this entire time, just like I just said, Washington keeps calling him son, and Hamilton keeps saying, don't call me son, or call me son one more time. Washington punishes Hamilton by sending him home. And I don't know why, but I thought what was going to happen here was that, like, then at the end of this song, Hamilton was going to accept being called son, and he was going to throw his arms around Washington and call him dad, and then Washington was going to... I'm so serious right now. And then Washington was going to, like, adopt him because he had never had a dad.
I like that version.
Thank you. And also Hamilton loves Aaron Burr, so, you know.
I like this Jeni's alternate Hamilton.
You know, it pays sometimes to not know the history that well, because then I can play around, you know?
Then we see the song That Would Be Enough, coming off of Hamilton getting sent home. This song is of Hamilton and Eliza. Eliza tells Hamilton that she's pregnant, and she pleads with him to stay home and focus on their family instead of going back to work. She tells him that she's willing to give up fame and glory for peace. And she says, quote, let this moment be the first chapter where you decide to stay, and I could be enough, and we could be enough.
I like her.
Me too.
I don't like Hamilton.
Yeah, he kind of sucks.
From here, we go to the song Guns and Ships.
Do you think Hamilton stayed home from work? No, he didn't. The next song is Guns and Ships.
It was not enough.
It was not enough. That's right.
Work from home was not enough.
That was just like a cut to him doing the opposite.
Right.
Yes. So Lafayette comes back onto the scene. So we get Daveed Diggs back into the show. He's been gone for too long. And he comes to the aid of America with additional resources from France. So he is talking to George Washington as he praises Hamilton's strategic brilliance. And he convinces Washington to bring Hamilton back to command his own battalion. So hopefully the U.S. can finish the war against the British.
Fun fact, Daveed Diggs set a record for fastest rap in Broadway history in this song.
I believe it. And then we have the song History Has Its Eyes on You. And a notable lyric from here is, you have no control, who lives, who dies, who tells your story. History has its eyes on you. Washington shares his personal regrets, and he warns Hamilton of the weight that comes with leadership. This candidness and mentorship kind of deepens their bond. Their father-son bond.
Daddy.
It really is daddy-son. Fun fact, this song was actually inspired by Lynn's conversations with Barack Obama.
Oh.
The song History Has Its Eyes on You. So, again, hearkening back to the time that the Hamilton came out and him playing the first song for Obama in the White House.
And I think your thread, Jeni, on, how we treat slavery, how this is all history is a retelling of something that happened in the past. And depending on who is telling the story, you can get a totally different version of the truth. And I think that's what this song is really getting at, because how this is the last part of the war. If these kind of big bets they make with using the French troops and the French ships that have now joined the fight, if they used appropriately, the U.S. could actually finish and win the war, or not. And then this whole thing of how it all plays out could be totally different.
Then we have the song Yorktown, The World Turned Upside Down. A notable lyric from here is, immigrants, we get the job done. And also this lyric, so the American experiment begins. And another one, we'll never be free until we end slavery. We have the Battle of Yorktown, and Hamilton and Lafayette lead key attacks. Mulligan gathers intelligence, the British surrender, victory is theirs. We hear the I imagine death so much it feels like a memory, again from Hamilton. Fun fact, the ensemble shouts, we won on beat 76 of the song, symbolizing the year 1776. And then there's the song What Comes Next from my favorite King George, and he sarcastically gives advice and warns the new country about how hard it is to lead. I do love how he treats America like an ex here.
Yeah, he does.
It's almost like you're gonna regret it. It's so hard to be single.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm gonna keep going because Megan and Brian have a crying baby on their end. So the next song is Dear Theodosia. This song is where Burr and Hamilton are singing to their newborn children, expressing hope for a better future. They lament that neither of their fathers were around when they were growing up, but that they're determined to be around for their own children and make the world a safe place for them, which is very special. Hamilton then receives a letter telling him that John Laurens died. He was killed in a gunfight after the war was already over. His dream was to emancipate and recruit men for the first all-black regiment. Alexander says, I have so much work to do. And he's very affected by this.
Then we have the song Non-Stop. In this song, we see that after the war, Hamilton builds his legal career. He writes most of the Federalist Papers and is appointed Secretary of the Treasury. And we can tell that Burr feels increasingly overshadowed by Hamilton. Their tension has continued and is growing. And fun fact, this song weaves together over a dozen musical motifs from earlier in Act 1. Which is fitting because this is the finale of Act 1.
Intermission time.
Act 2 starts with the song What Did I Miss? And in this song, Aaron Burr narrates what's going on now. So Washington is the president of the newly formed America, Hamilton is the Secretary of the Treasury, and America has established a two-party system. We also meet Thomas Jefferson. Thomas is played by David Diggs, who was previously Lafayette, and Thomas returns from France and joins Washington's cabinet. He quickly becomes Hamilton's ideological rival and aligns with James Madison, who's played by Oak, the same actor that played Hercules Mulligan in Act 1. And fun fact, David Diggs based Jefferson's walk and sort of style of performance on Prince and Mick Jagger, which is probably a lot of the humorous physical acting that you were picking up on. It's very distinct.
Yeah, I think that's why his characters, I should say, probably stood out more than any of the others.
So that leads to the first cabinet battle. So this is the first cabinet meeting they have, which is a rap battle between Jefferson and Hamilton. And specifically, they are arguing over the federal government assuming states' debts. Washington tells Hamilton he needs to learn to compromise and convince more people to see his side because he doesn't really have the votes to get people to want to take on his kind of federal government treasury plans.
And then we have the song Take a Break. This song serves as a peek into Alexander Hamilton's personal life. We see Angelica and Hamilton. Angelica is Hamilton's wife's sister, just as a reminder. They write letters back and forth to each other. In one of the letters, he writes, "My dearest Angelica." Hate. Actually, I was annoyed at her too, though, because I was like, girl, that's your sister.
All the way around, hate.
Then Philip, Alexander's son, turns 9 and learns to play piano, and Hamilton is proud of him. Eliza tries to persuade Hamilton to take a family vacation with her and Angelica, but he stays behind to work.
Then we get the song Say No to This. And this is where Hamilton begins an affair with Maria Reynolds, played by Jasmine Cephas Jones, who played Peggy in Act 1. So again, like you said, Jeni, Hamilton is home for the summer while his family is out vacationing upstate. And this is where he meets Mariah. He starts sleeping with Mariah, and her husband finds out and exploits the situation to extort money from Hamilton. And he pays the bribe in order to keep sleeping with her and buy their silence so Eliza doesn't find out.
Ugh.
I will say I have to go back one song, back to the song here with them trying to get him to come to the countryside for the summer. So I think what is one of the funniest lines that's delivered throughout the whole musical that is not delivered by Jonathan Groff is when Angelica and Eliza are telling him he should come to the summer, and John Adams spends the summer with his family, to which Alexander Hamilton replies, "Well, John Adams doesn't have a real job anyways," which is hilarious because he does end up becoming president, as we see later inside the musical, but John Adams is very much a president who doesn't do a lot as his presidency. He doesn't do a notable amount of things as president, and he's not well liked by really anybody, as we see by people running against him in his own party in the next election. And so, anyways, it's just funny. There's constantly people talking down on John Adams.
And nobody plays him, right? We never see him.
Nope, we never see him.
never see him. Not important enough to get his own player.
Just gets roasted the entire time.
Mm-hmm. So after the say no to this and the affair, we get to the room where it happens. And so a notable lyric is two Virginians and an immigrant walk into a room, diametrically opposed foes. They emerge with a compromise, having opened doors that were previously closed. So this is I think this is actually one of the most interesting songs of the whole musical, because it kind of is describing something that I don't think we actually know in history a ton about. We know that it was this dinner and a compromise between Hamilton, Jefferson, and Madison, where they decided that the nation's capital was not going to be in New York City. And instead, it was going to be in Washington, D.C., or on the Potomac River. And Alexander would get his treasury plans, including the federal government assuming states' debts, passed through Congress. And so Aaron Burr is narrating this song and singing the song, and he's frustrated with not being included in this key big decision. This is the whole drawback of his whole life and his strategy of he never speaks up. He waits to see what happens. Well, because he waits, he doesn't get to be included in this very important decision.
And then we have Schuyler Defeated, where Burr wins Hamilton's father-in-law's Senate seat, intensifying their rivalry. And we jump right into Cabinet Battle number 2, where Hamilton and Jefferson argue, again via rap battle, this time over whether to support France in its own revolution. Hamilton's neutrality wins out, even though Jefferson is Secretary of State.
The next song is called Washington on Your Side. A notable lyric from this song is, it must be nice to have Washington on your side. And in this song, Jefferson, Madison, and Burr lament about Hamilton's political power and their inability to check Hamilton while he has Washington's support. He is kind of known as, like we said earlier, Washington's right-hand man, and he can kind of get away with what he wants. And Washington is still this, God-like, father-like figure to all of them. And so they feel like they can't touch Hamilton while Washington is supporting him.
Not while Washington's his daddy.
That's right. But they do say they're going to follow the money and see where it goes to try to get dirt on Hamilton.
After them lamenting about how Hamilton can do whatever he wants, we then find out that Washington is actually going to step down as president. And so it is his kind of last ballad to the audience that he is going to step down from power, and he wants Hamilton to help write his farewell address. The name of the song is One Last Time. So fun fact, though, this song actually uses real lines from Washington's address that he gave when he decided to step down. And part of the reason why presidents do step down after 2 terms, if they get elected for 2 terms, is because he did this. If he had not done this, we probably would have a different power system today. So, big deal.
So you're saying that precedent matters? Next, we have the song I Know Him. This is where King George reacts gleefully to the news of Washington's retirement. He mocks the American government for replacing who is in charge. Because obviously, he's not getting replaced. He's king.
Then we get a very short song called The Adams Administration that kind of just glosses over John Adams' term as a president. In this song, Hamilton clashes with President John Adams and writes a scathing pamphlet against him. So again, this is another example of one of those pamphlet wars that happened at this time.
The next song is We Know, and this is where Jefferson, Madison, and Burr go and confront Hamilton. So Hamilton is now in this war with John Adams, and he's on the ropes politically, and then they go confront him about financial things that they see in his history. And specifically what they uncover is the payments that Hamilton made to James Reynolds when he was sleeping with Mariah. They think that he was actually embezzling funds from the Treasury, from the U.S. taxpayers, when actually it was from his own bank account and he was just covering up an affair. So he gets paranoid. He tells them what it actually is and shows receipts. And they're like, okay, this isn't what we thought it was. This is less exciting. However, it leads on to him to make a very interesting decision in the next part of the musical.
In the song Hurricane, Hamilton reflects on his past and how he has always written his way out of everything. He decides to publish the Reynolds pamphlet in an effort to protect his legacy.
And then we get the song, The Reynolds Pamphlet. And in this song, we see that Hamilton publishes information about his affair and the payments he made to James Reynolds. He does this to quote-unquote control the narrative and make sure that Burr doesn't have anything to blackmail him with in the future, because basically all of his political rivals have like the biggest dirt on him possible. So he thinks the best choice is to just air it out himself. Interesting. His political career is obviously devastated by this. And like one of the best lines of this song is Jefferson repeatedly saying he's never going to be president now, which is true. He never becomes president. And then we see Angelica come into town, and Alexander at first is relieved to see her because he's like, oh my gosh, thank God, finally somebody is here to be on my side of this. But she says, I'm not here for you. Put what we had aside, I'm standing at her side. You'll never be satisfied, which is a callback to the song Satisfied. And we even see in the song King George comes back on stage to dance and celebrate Alexander's downfall.
Wow, the tea. The fact that he ruined his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Although nowadays I think that this does work when you try and control the narrative and like come out in a certain way
I think
before
so too.
the news spreads.
It definitely works better now. The idea that he would have done it then, when people, like these pamphlet wars that you're talking about, people could just type up or write up whatever they want, and they could just shove pamphlets everywhere. There was also these pamphlets would just get printed and sent around. The fact that he published his own, airing these like rumors out, this isn't like the 2020s where somebody could go to Facebook and you could stalk somebody and dig up this dirt on them. No one would have been able to confirm any of this, like if he had not come out and said all of this himself. So it was a pretty, I think it just speaks to like how brazen he is throughout his entire life. Like he's always just shooting off, saying whatever he wants, and then he does this. Why did you do this?
Prideful.
Wow.
Prideful.
And then we have the song Burn, where Eliza sings about her heartbreak and betrayal and burns Hamilton's love letters.
Fun fact, Philippa Sue, the performer who plays Eliza Hamilton, actually requested that the fire on stage is real in order to like add emotional impact and like make it so that she's actually burning physical letters. And also, the original version of the song Burn is much angrier. They actually released a Hamilton mixtape where famous people sang versions of the songs. Some of them were the final versions, some of them were different versions, and the original Burn is recorded on that mixtape, so you can find it there. I also did some research, and this is factually pretty accurate because there are very few letters from Eliza actually to Hamilton that exist today. So the theory from historians is that Eliza didn't want quote-unquote history to have a great picture of her or her perspective. And in this song, she repeatedly is saying that she's erasing herself from the narrative. And in fact, there is now very little recorded history from her perspective anymore, even though you can assume that there were a lot of letters between the two of them.
That takes us to Blow Us All Away. So Hamilton's son, Philip, is now in college or just graduated college, and he challenges someone who talked bad about Hamilton to a duel. Hamilton actually gives him the guns and tells him how to do a duel. He tells him to not shoot him, but to essentially shoot to the sky and avoid actually killing the man. Because he said that if he does shoot to the sky, the other guy should too, because that's the honorable thing to do. It has the similar song and reprisal sound of the last kind of 10 Commandments, Duel Commandments song. Unfortunately, this does not go as well as the first duel, where Charles Lee is the one who shot and Lawrence walks away. Instead, Philip is shot.
Sad.
Very sad. We get a couple of really sad songs here. The first one being the reprise of Stay Alive. And in this song, we see Hamilton and Eliza reach Philip in his final moments, and they are there with him when he dies. And this goes right into the song It's Quiet Uptown. A notable lyric from this song is, the Hamiltons move uptown and learn to live with the unimaginable. And then Alexander says, it's quiet uptown. I never liked the quiet before. This to me is the track 5 of the musical. If you're a Taylor Swift fan, you know track 5 is like the most heart-wrenching, most vulnerable of all of her songs. And it is interesting also that Burr is normally our narrator, but Angelica actually narrates the song. Throughout the song, we see the Hamiltons grieving. Both Alexander and Eliza are wearing black. Alexander says that he wishes he could trade his life for Philip's, and he begs Eliza to let him stay by her side through this. And ultimately, she forgives him, and they move forward together.
One thing what we talked about as this was happening is this is a really sad song, and it's the saddest moment of the whole time. And losing a child is, I can't even imagine, saddest thing imaginable. They did have 8 kids. So Philip was the oldest of 8, and none of those none of those other 7 kids are featured at all in the story. They just focus on Philip.
That doesn't make this better.
It doesn't make it any
they
better.
They have 7 spare. Is that what you're trying to say?
He's just trying to say that there was more to the family than meets the eye.
There was more to the family than the scenes. Because in the scenes, it looks the scene in the song is portrayed like they're almost like they're widows. Like it's just them now.
Mm-hmm.
But there are 7 other kids running around that are not being shown in this. One of them is actually named Philip, as we learned in our research. They named another kid Philip after Philip passed away.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, so they had another baby after Philip died and named him Philip.
At least one of those children was born after Philip died, yeah.
Okay, can I tell you guys something? This is not the same thing at all. But sorry, this is a serious topic. This reminds me of my ex's mom, who had this, like now I feel okay saying it. She was a nice lady, but she had this crazy habit of like getting German shepherds, naming them Precious, and then when they would die, she would get another German shepherd named Precious.
No. Oh no. No. That's psychopath behavior.
I think maybe that should have been my red flag. But I'm like, they did a Precious with
Horrifying.
Philip.
They did a
Precious.
Wow.
I don't like it.
Mm-mm. To change the subject, then we have the song The Election of 1800, where Burr and Jefferson are campaigning for president. The Federalist Party looks to Hamilton to see who he's going to vote for, and he decides that he supports Jefferson because he says Jefferson has beliefs, Burr has none. And I knew this was going to happen, but I felt really bad for Burr because, again, I don't know why, but I just like related to him more. And he was kind of confident that like, oh, Hamilton is my friend. He's going to stick up for me. He hates Jefferson. But no, stabbed in the back.
And this is from like a history, the last maybe like big history, because a lot of the rest of this has to do with his personal life. But him backing Jefferson is it's not the only thing, but it is one of the turning points to get Jefferson elected instead of Aaron Burr. Had Aaron Burr been elected, the Louisiana Purchase probably would not have happened. So like most of the Western United States would not belong to the United States. It would be some other country or still owned by France. It would not be America as we know it. So this, like, again, Hamilton never was president. He was on the cabinet, was the highest office he ever held. But this was a big lasting impact he had by tilting the election towards Jefferson. It's a big deal. So this fallout, Burr is obviously very upset. We have now firmly left frenemy territory, and now we are in enemy territory after this. Burr gets very upset. We have some funny lines between the letters back and forth with A.Ham and A.Burr when they're signing off their letters, and they set a time and place to have a third duel of the show. And the name of the song is Your Obedient Servant.
The next song is called Best of Wives and Best of Women, and it takes place early in the morning on the day of the duel when Hamilton is up and getting ready. Eliza also wakes up because he's awake and comes and asks him to come back to bed, and he says that he has to go to a meeting and lovingly reassures her and calls her the best of wives and best of women. Then we get the song The World Was Wide Enough. And this is where Burr and Hamilton have their duel. And before it starts, Burr confesses, because he's narrating as this is happening, he confesses that he's a bad shot and he knows Hamilton is a great shot. And Hamilton was wearing his glasses that day. We also see Ariana DeBose's back as the bullet. And we see both men hold their guns up and time freezes. We hear Hamilton's "I imagine death so much it feels like a memory" speech again. And we see Washington, Lawrence, and Eliza all come up and speak to Hamilton kind of in this moment before either men put their gun up. When Eliza comes up to him, he tells Eliza to take her time and that he'll see her on the other side. Then time resumes, and we see Hamilton shoot into the sky. Burr shoots Hamilton, and we find out that Angelica and Eliza were at Hamilton's side when he died. We continue to hear Burr's perspective after this, and he says that now he's the villain in our history books, and he should have known that the world was wide enough for both Hamilton and him.
Am I right to assume that Hamilton, didn't think that Burr would also put his gun up to the sky, but he did it to, honor his son and to be a good man?
I think so.
He sacrificed himself?
I think so. I mean, I think that's what they're trying to say when all the people come up and talk to Hamilton and he tells Eliza, take your time, I'll see you on the other side. That's before they've even put their guns up, so I think he knows that it's going to happen. And I think Burr also makes a comment about it being very close to the place that his son died in a duel. I don't know that he knew that Burr was going to shoot him, but I think he was prepared to shoot to the sky and die. I think he was ready for that.
Which I saw is not what actually happened in the duel that was in real history. He missed or something, but it's alluded to that maybe he purposely missed.
I didn't know that.
Very
Interesting.
possible.
Who knows? But maybe that's what inspired the whole storyline of him shooting to the sky.
Yeah, interesting.
And then we have the last song, which is called "Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story." There's an iconic lyric about Eliza where they sing her name, Eliza, and then she says, "I put myself back in the narrative." Washington comes back wearing white. He wraps up the story with Burr, Jefferson, and Angelica. They all say, "Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Eliza." Eliza takes over the story. She raises funds in D.C. for the Washington Monument. She speaks out against slavery, and she wonders if she's doing enough. She says she's proudest of the orphanage. She helped establish the first private orphanage in New York City. She has helped raise hundreds of children. At the very end of the song, Eliza moves to the front of the stage, and she gasps. And that's the end.
This gasp is a big topic of conversation when you're talking about Hamilton. It's meant to be left up to audience interpretation. Some think that it's her being reunited with Alexander, she sees him again. Some people think she's seeing the audience, it's breaking the fourth wall, and she's seeing that her story is being told. Some think that she's finding transcendence and peace and sort of moving through to the other side. Philippa Sue, the actress, said that her interpretation changed from night to night.
Interesting.
One thing that I don't think I had fully realized until we on this rewatch was her saying that in this song, Eliza, that she lived another 50 years, to which I responded, that has to be a hyperbole. There's no way she lived another 50 years.
How old was she?
She lived to be 97 years old.
She did live. She lived
He
a
died.
whole
He died when
lifetime.
he was 47, 48, 49. She lived to another extra lifetime than Alexander did.
Go
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
I think my favorite interpretation of the gasp at the ending is the one where she sees the audience and gasps that the story is being told, because that is literally what she's singing about. I liked that one the best.
I think I do too.
What do you think, Brian?
I kind of like that one the best as well. I think it really is, it feels like it's her moment. Her realizing her moment at the end of this is all the things that I got to do after in her second lifetime, essentially. She did all of these things, and I think that's what's really about.
And choreography wise, you see the whole cast sort of gather almost in a line behind her, and Hamilton, Lynn, walks her up to the front of the stage to present her to the audience almost, which wouldn't make as much sense if she was being reunited with Hamilton. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe. Although I do like that interpretation too. I don't know.
I do too.
Also, can we talk about how cool the rotating stage was?
Yeah.
And how difficult that would be to act on that?
Guys, go to Spotify or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Search Andy Blankenbuehler Hamilcast. He's the choreographer. Listen to his episode, because I think it's my favorite one. It's fascinating to hear him talk about using the spinning stage and how he like used choreography to tell the story subconsciously, sort of like through all the background actors. It's incredible.
Nice. I'll have to check that one out.
And then go back and watch Jonathan Groff dance during the Adams administration lead-in.
Is that when he's like dancing by himself?
It's
it's not the
It's
Adams
when he's like
administration.
dropping it low when they find out that Hamilton won't ever be president.
The Reynolds pamphlet.
The Reynolds
yes.
pamphlet. That's the
it.
song. Yeah, just go back
He
to
does
that
drop it low. I
blip.
forgot about that.
He just like comes back randomly because every other scene he's on stage by himself pretty much, and then he like wanders back on stage to dance that Alexander Hamilton is ruined.
Love it.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this very long and exciting episode.
And thank you, Brian, for being our special guest. I came into this a little nervous because I was like, what am I going to say about Hamilton? I didn't really enjoy it that much, to be honest. But I was excited to hear the fun facts and stuff from you guys because I thought it would give me more appreciation. And then, Brian, your AP US history really came in handy here. And I feel like I don't know, I feel like I understand the story a little bit better now and maybe have a new appreciation for it. I would watch it again.
It's fun. Listen to it in the car all the time.
How do you feel about your first episode of what we're watching?
So fun. So excited to be on the podcast finally. Thank you so much for having me on. We'll see y'all next week.
Oh yeah, Brian is the newest addition permanently.
I'll be replacing Megan from here on out.
You're welcome.
This is the Brian and Jeni show.
That's right. Bye. I'll be excused. I'll see myself out.
No, it's fun to get to be part of the show this week. Thank you guys for having me on.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Brian. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening.
And we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.